The disappearance on I-96. Every town has a dark side. Not always obvious, not always violent, but it's there. Some cases haunt us because of brutality, because of blood, chaos, or undeniable evil. And then there are cases that stay with us for a different reason. Because they begin so normally, so quietly, so completely ordinary that you can almost see yourself inside them. This is one of those cases. It starts on a random Thursday afternoon in late May of 1990. Traffic moves steadily along the pavement of Interstate 96. Commuters are thinking about dinner, about errands, about getting home before the evening rain rolls in. Dozens of drivers pass the same stretch of shoulder that day. None of them realize they are witnessing the final confirmed moments of someone's normal life. There are no screams, no shattered glass, no visible struggle. Just a silver car parked on the side of the highway. A calm conversation between adults and a 30-year old woman who will vanish without a trace. In the spring of 1990, Paige Renkoski was building a steady life. She was 30 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, the kind of smile that made strangers feel like old friends within minutes. People described her as warm without being loud, funny without trying too hard. Her younger sister once said Paige moved through the world lightly. She made friends effortlessly. She'd offer to do someone's hair just because she felt like it. She had a quirky sense of humor that could catch you off guard in the best way. At the time, Paige worked at an educational care center in Lansing while studying child development. She liked structure, routine, the quiet satisfaction of small daily responsibilities that added up to something meaningful. She wasn't chasing fame. She wasn't running from anything. She was engaged to a man named Steve DeBranda. Together, they were building a life in Dewitt Township. It was the kind of future that doesn't feel remarkable while you're living it, until it's suddenly gone. On May 24, 1990, Paige's mother needed a ride to Detroit Metropolitan Airport. She was flying to Atlanta to visit family. Paige offered to take her. They left around 11:30 a.m. The drive lasted about an hour and a half. Mother and daughter talking casually, nothing heavy, nothing urgent, no arguments, no tension, no hint that this would be the last time they would see each other. After dropping her mom at the terminal, Paige didn't rush home. She planned to meet a friend in Canton Township, about half an hour away. It was warm that afternoon, no tight schedule, just a relaxed stop before heading back. They walked through a park, stopped for frozen yogurt at TCBY. Later, she visited another friend's house. It was a completely normal afternoon. By around 2:30 p.m., Paige said her goodbyes and headed back to her car. She had a 4:30 appointment scheduled later that day. She was expected home. Before getting on the freeway, she made one last stop at a small party store along Ford Road, just west of Interstate 275. The clerk working that shift would later become an important witness. She remembered Paige clearly, not because Paige seemed upset, but because she stood out, loose, multicolored pants with bold floral patterns, a long beaded necklace, a confident, easy presence. They exchanged a few friendly words. The clerk complimented her outfit. Paige purchased a 40-ounce beer, poured some into a fast food cup, resealed the bottle, and walked back out to her silver Oldsmobile. That was sometime between 2:30 and 2:45 p.m. It was the last confirmed sighting of Paige under completely normal circumstances. From there, she merged onto Interstate 96 westbound. The drive home to Akimos should have taken about an hour. For most of that drive, she would have blended into the landscape of traffic, one car among thousands. Completely unremarkable until something changed. Multiple witnesses later reported seeing Paige's silver Oldsmobile along I-96. Two long-haul truckers remembered a blonde woman driving west. Another person believed they might have seen her at a rest stop, though that sighting was never confirmed. What investigators know for certain is this: Paige made it as far as Livingston County, and that's where the timeline fractures. Sometime between approximately 3:15 and 4:30 p.m., Paige pulled her vehicle onto the shoulder of I-96. The location was roughly a quarter-mile east of an exit ramp, close enough to reach help in under a minute. Gas stations, restaurants, public visibility, but she didn't make it to the exit. She stopped right there. Later examination revealed nothing mechanically wrong with the car. The gas tank was full. No visible damage. No flat tire, no overheating engine, no emergency. So why stop, and who or what made her pull over? This is where witness accounts become both crucial and frustrating. Drivers passing at 60 or 70 miles per hour only had seconds to observe the scene. But several noticed something that lingered in their memory: a maroon or burgundy minivan. Some witnesses said it was parked in front of Paige's car. Others believed it was behind, but most agreed it was positioned close to her vehicle on the shoulder. And Paige was not alone. She was seen standing between the vehicles, talking to two men. From a distance, nothing looked violent, nothing frantic. One witness remembered her gesturing casually with her hands, like someone explaining directions. Another recalled one of the men resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. To anyone driving past, it looked like a roadside conversation. Routine, calm, almost friendly. And that's what makes it deeply unsettling, because dozens of people saw the moment, and no one thought to stop. One witness, an off-duty law enforcement officer, later described something that changed the tone of the case entirely. As he drove by, he saw a man standing near the front of Paige's Oldsmobile. The man had his arm extended outward as if holding something in his hand. The officer assumed he was witnessing a traffic stop. He believed the man might be plainclothes law enforcement, possibly displaying a badge. That assumption matters because Paige's father had worked in law enforcement. She grew up understanding authority. If someone signaled her to pull over, especially someone presenting a badge, she would likely comply without hesitation. If that badge was real or if it wasn't, there's little reason to believe she would have questioned it. Another small detail adds to the mystery. When investigators later processed the vehicle, they found Paige's shoes on the floorboard near the driver's seat. Driving barefoot isn't unusual. Many people do it. But leaving your car barefoot on a gravel shoulder of a busy freeway, without your purse, without locking the vehicle, in the middle of the afternoon, that suggests she believed she would only be gone for a moment. Just a quick interaction, just a brief conversation, just long enough to step away from the driver's seat. By around 6:00 p.m., a deputy from the Livingston County Sheriff's Department responded to reports of an abandoned vehicle along I-96. When he arrived, the scene was eerie. The Oldsmobile was still running, headlights on. A rainstorm had moved through the area, and the windshield wipers were still sweeping back and forth across the glass. Inside the vehicle were Paige's purse, her shoes, and the beer she had purchased earlier. There were no immediate signs of violence. No visible blood, no broken windows, no clear evidence of a crime. At that moment, no missing person report had yet been filed. To the deputy, it appeared to be an abandoned vehicle. He shut off the engine, locked the doors, tagged the car for towing, and left. No photographs were taken at the scene. The precise location of the vehicle was not carefully documented. The shoulder was not secured. Whatever physical evidence may have existed along that stretch of road was exposed to traffic, weather, and time. By the time investigators realized Paige was missing. The opportunity to preserve the original scene was gone. Those first hours can define a case, and in this one they slipped away quietly. Meanwhile, Paige's family had no idea anything was wrong. Her mother was still in Atlanta. Her fiancé was waiting for her to show up at his softball game, assuming she was simply running late. Earlier that evening, the sheriff's department had left a voicemail at her mother's house, stating that Paige's vehicle had been located on the side of the highway. But no one was home to hear it. In 1990, there were no cell phones. Communication relied on landlines and answering machines, and silence carried weight. When Paige didn't call to say she was home, something she normally would have done, concern began to grow. Her sister tried calling. No answer. They contacted Steve and asked him to check the voicemail at the house. That's when he heard the message. That's when confusion turned into fear. This wasn't a delay. This wasn't a minor inconvenience. Something was seriously wrong. Steve contacted police in DeWitt Township to officially report Paige missing. The case was transferred to Livingston County, where her car had been found. By Saturday, investigators processed the Oldsmobile as a crime scene. Inside, they recovered approximately 20 unidentified fingerprints scattered throughout the vehicle. They also found palm prints on the trunk, positioned in a way that suggested someone had leaned against it. When those prints were run through law enforcement databases, no matches came back. Whoever left them had no criminal record on file. Over the following weeks and months, investigators pursued every lead. The maroon minivan became central to the investigation. Witness descriptions varied. Roughly 80% of accounts described one of the men as black. Others believed he may have been Hispanic. Sketch artists produced multiple composite drawings over the years. Some depicted a smaller, framed man. Later versions shifted towards someone taller. None led to an arrest. The case drew enormous public attention, not only because Paige disappeared, but because of where and how it happened. Broad daylight, a heavily traveled highway, witnesses who saw her standing calmly on the shoulder and assumed everything was fine. More than 200 tips were received, fields were searched, wooded areas combed, cadaver dogs deployed. Ground-penetrating radar used, properties examined, nothing. Then, in 2011, investigators received something deeply unsettling. An anonymous envelope arrived. Inside was a hand-drawn map, detailed, carefully labeled. It appeared to show directions from an I-96 exit to a wooded area nearby. Included was a cryptic note suggesting the map might be a red herring, or perhaps something more deliberate. A message from someone who knew exactly what happened that afternoon on the shoulder of Interstate 96, and perhaps wanted to remind investigators that the truth was still buried somewhere out there. The name that changed everything, the anonymous map, led nowhere. Investigators followed its directions carefully. They searched the wooded area it pointed to, brought in cadaver dogs, examined the soil, looked for disturbed earth. They found nothing, no remains, no buried evidence, no trace of Paige. But the message inside the envelope lingered. The sender claimed they had verified what they could. Verified what? And how? It felt less like a prank and more like someone reminding law enforcement that the truth still existed somewhere. And then the years kept passing. For Paige's family, time did not heal anything. It simply stretched the ache thinner. Her mother, artist, refused to let the world forget her daughter's name. Grief could have crushed her. Instead, she weaponized it. She became an advocate. She helped establish Michigan's annual Missing in Michigan conference, pushing for awareness, for reform, for attention on cases that had grown cold in filing cabinets. She didn't just fight for Paige, She fought for every family living in the same unbearable uncertainty. But advocacy does not replace answers. In December 2017, artist passed away. She died without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. That's the part that never gets easier to say. Over the decades, investigators revisited everyone close to Paige. Her fiancé, Steve, was scrutinized repeatedly. He cooperated. He stayed in contact with her family. No evidence tied him to her disappearance. He was cleared more than once. With no signs pointing inward, detectives were forced to look outward. And outward meant predators. Michigan in the late 1980s and early 1990s was not immune to violent offenders. Investigators examined several men known to operate in the region during that time. One was Arthur Ream, a man with a documented history of violence against women. Another was Gary Arties, whose alleged crimes were never fully mapped. And then there was Samuel Little. At the time Paige vanished, his name didn't stand out. Years later, he would confess to dozens of murders across the United States, including killings in Michigan during the same period Paige disappeared. Each of these men was investigated. None could be definitively linked to Paige. No DNA, no physical evidence, no confession, and slowly, painfully, the case quieted, not because it stopped mattering, but because there was nowhere left to push. Until 35 years later, something shifted. Detectives in neighboring Washtenaw County made an arrest in a separate cold case. A 69-year-old man named Buster Robbins was charged with the murder of Beverly Wiviett. Beverly had been killed in September 1989. She was 30 years old. DNA collected at the time of her death had been preserved. In 2024, it was sent for forensic genealogy testing. The results pointed to Robbins, and that's when investigators started comparing cases, side by side, detail by detail, and what they saw was difficult to ignore. Beverly had been sleeping in her car in Canton Township after dropping her son off at school. At some point, she was abducted from her vehicle. She was assaulted. She was shot. Her body was later found along Gottfredson Road in Superior Township. But it wasn't just the brutality that caught attention. It was what happened to her car. It was discovered later that same night. Engine still running, driver's door open, purse still inside, shoes left behind, sound familiar. Now place that next to Paige's case. Both women were 30, both connected to Canton Township, both vehicles found running, both with personal belongings left inside. Beverly was killed in September 1989. Paige vanished 8.5 months later, in May 1990. Patterns like that are not ignored. They are dissected. There was one more detail. In 1989 and 1990, Robbins was reportedly driving a vehicle that resembled an unmarked police car, a late model Chrysler New Yorker. In Beverly's case, a witness reported seeing a blue car with a white top speeding away from the area. And then investigators remembered something else. Robbins had worked as a reserve police officer during that time period. If he had access to a badge, even a reserve badge, it introduces a chilling possibility: authority. Which brings us back to the off-duty officer who drove past Paige on I-96 and believed he saw someone flashing a badge. What if that wasn't a misunderstanding? What if it was a tactic? If Paige believed she was being stopped by law enforcement, compliance would have been instinctive. She wouldn't argue, she wouldn't panic. She would step out of the vehicle barefoot, purse left behind, assuming it was routine. And by the time she realized something was wrong, it may have already been too late. But here is where the case grows complicated again. Despite the DNA linked to Beverly's murder, A district court judge declined to bind Robbins' case over for trial in March of last year. His defense argued the DNA only proved sexual contact, not murder. The judge stated in court, "I believe there's more to this story." Robbins was described as dangerous and a flight risk. He was held on a $5 million bond. Prosecutors appealed. The legal battle continues. And while none of this proves what happened to Paige, for the first time in decades, investigators had something concrete. A name, a pattern, a possible explanation for how a woman could be taken from the side of a busy interstate in broad daylight without a single scream reported. Still, there are unanswered questions. The unidentified fingerprints and palm prints recovered from Paige's Oldsmobile have been tested repeatedly over the years. No matches. Whether they align with Robbins has not been publicly released. If they match, it changes everything. If they don't, the case fractures again. Right now, the cold case team continues working 3 primary theories. First, Paige knew her abductor. Investigators consider this unlikely. The odds of randomly encountering someone she knew along that specific stretch of highway are low. Second, a staged emergency. Someone faked car trouble or created a situation forcing her to stop, but there was no meaningful damage to her vehicle. No clear physical evidence supporting that scenario. Third, and most compelling authority, a fake traffic stop. A badge, a vehicle that looked official enough. A calm roadside interaction that dozens of witnesses dismissed as routine. It explains why she stopped just short of an exit, why she stepped out barefoot, why she left her purse behind, why she appeared calm, and why no one intervened, because no one believed a crime was happening. Today, Paige would be 59 years old. She would have built a career, celebrated anniversaries, watched nieces and nephews grow up, argued about politics at family dinners, complained about back pain, marked time in all the small, invisible ways we take for granted. Instead, she exists in fragments. A photograph, a missing person flyer, a case file. 5 years is a long time, but it is not long enough to stop looking for someone you love. For now, the investigation remains open. The connection to Robbins is still being evaluated. The legal process in Beverly's case is ongoing. And somewhere in memory, in soil, or in silence, the truth still exists, because someone knows what happened that afternoon on Interstate 96. Someone remembers more than they've said. And sometimes, in cases like this, it only takes one person deciding they can't carry the secret anymore. One call, one detail, one crack in decades of silence to finally bring someone home. If you have information about the disappearance of Paige Renkoski, you are urged to contact the Livingston County Sheriff's Office. Even after more than 3 decades, the smallest detail could change everything, because ordinary Thursdays should not end this way. And highways should not erase people, but sometimes they do. And when they do, we keep looking.